Hello and welcome to Kloeker Education Foundation, where we provide quality content for amazing teachers and students. If you're joining us from our previous video on competition, welcome back. If this is your first time, we're glad you're here. This is our Intro to Business series, and this lesson is on goods and services. Let's dive in. We have two objectives within this lesson: to A, discuss economic goods and services, and B, explain how these goods and services are classified. So starting with objective A, discussing goods and services, you might be thinking, so what? Why is this important? Imagine this scenario, if you will. Erica and John are running some errands. They took the guitar to the shop to add new strings. They picked up prom shoes at the mall and then stopped for dinner. They have affected the economy by purchasing goods and services and satisfying the wants that they have: new shoes, new strings, and dinner. Now, wants are, of course, desires for things that we may or may not actually require. We talked about that in our previous video. It could be cravings for things like ice cream or pizza. It could be wishes, but it could also be needs. Wants are unlimited. It varies from person to person. It varies within the age groups. And of course, there are hundreds of wants within each individual that are all competing for fulfillment. In our previous video, we talked about the difference between economic wants and non-economic wants. We clarified that economic wants required money to satisfy, such as a car, getting a haircut, having jewelry, or eating out. And we clarified that non-economic wants are something that can be satisfied for free, such as spending time with friends, watching the sunset, going out for a walk. These things don't require money. They are entirely free. Now, economic goods and services. Economic goods, they are physical, tangible items, usually able to satisfy the human wants. They are scarce in the availability, but they are transferable. Economic services are services that satisfy an economic want and are the same characteristics of useful and scarce. However, they are intangible. You cannot physically hold on to someone's service. Now, the relationship of the consumers and the producers in that economy: the consumers have limited resources to purchase said economic goods and services, but they communicate wants by purchasing or not purchasing goods. Producers have limited resources to provide to the consumer to produce those economic goods and services, but they must make sure that they produce what the consumer wants. Businesses will not be successful if nobody wants the product. Now let's get into our second objective, explaining how economic goods and services are classified. There is a difference between consumer products and industrial products. Consumer products are economic goods and services purchased and used by the final consumer, the final user. For example, food, gas, and sunglasses in most cases. You would not want to eat someone else's food after they were done with it. That would be terrible. Once a person purchases gas and puts it in the car, it's almost impossible to get it out of the gas tank to put it into your own. Industrial products, however, are economic goods and services purchased by the producer and are usually for resale or to make other goods or services. For example, using in business operations of buildings, equipment, office supplies. These are all used to create the goods and services that the consumer wants to purchase. Now, product classifications for marketing, consumers, and industrial classifications helps marketers plan their activities and serves as a guide for promoting said good or services, distributing those goods and services, and selling those goods and services. It's based on the consumer's buying habits, what they purchase, what they do not. Convenience products, of course, purchased quickly without much thought or effort, easily substituted and usually low cost, maybe a staple item or impulse items. For example, bread, milk, or when they go and get gas, you say, do you want to buy a car wash as well? Because there's a car wash in the gas station. If you're walking through a store, generally at the checkout, there's a short little row of candy, snacks, drinks, and others that are there to act as impulse items or convenience products for you at your final stage of shopping. Shopping products are where the consumer generally shops around and compares to get the best quality, price, or service. It tends to be a lot more expensive than those convenience items like bread, milk, eggs, cheese. It often requires the assistance of a salesperson, for example, furniture stores, a car dealership, purchasing a computer, making sure it has the right program and price and can perform the services you want it to do, looking and shopping around for a college education and what school has the best program and the best tuition rates. All of these things are incredibly expensive and large purchases, and you should shop around to compare quality, price, and service. There are also specialty products. These have unique or special characteristics that the consumer is going to take to obtain. They're often name brand, not easily substituted, such as antiques or sports cars, luxury spa service. This might require you to have a membership to get in on the ground floor. For example, sports cars, Ferrari has a deal where they won't sell you a new one unless you have about 9 of the old cars. It's things that you're willing to go above and beyond to get. And our last consumer products definition is unsought products. These are usually bought out of adversity rather than desire because something happens and you need to get it. For example, if someone breaks their leg and has to purchase crutches or a temporary wheelchair, when someone passes away, a coffin or a urn, these are things that people do not just keep in their closet for the occasion. It's bought out of adversity because something in life has happened. There are 5 types of industrial products. The first being materials. These items become part of a finished product later on after they're processed or altered. For example, trees being turned into lumber, gold, or flour for food. These are all things that will be later processed into a final product. There is parts. These parts become a part of a finished product without an additional processing. For example, bolts, screws, tires, all of these are parts on a car that can be replaced, but they've already been processed from a material of iron ore or rubber into said product. Installations are another important industrial product. They are, of course, high cost and long-lasting items that are used to help produce other goods and services. It affects the amount of goods and services that can be produced and the amount of time it takes. For example, buildings or a conveyor belt system for the assembly line, blast furnaces to smelt iron into other parts and molds. These are all examples of installations. We also have equipment. This is used in the operation of the business, but not in the actual production of a good or service. That is, of course, the installation. These equipment pieces have lower cost. They have shorter lifespans. For example, computers, forklifts, telephones. These are all equipment used in the day-to-day operations, but they're not used in the actual production of said goods. And lastly, we have supplies. These are constantly being used and purchased for the operation of the business. It typically has one of the lowest cost of any industrial products. These are things like stationery, pens, pencils, receipt paper, scissors, and small things like rulers and stuff like that that are used in the day-to-day running of the business. So let's take some of the information that we've covered in this lesson and apply it to situations we might have been familiar with and to our own lives. Think about 5 economic wants you fulfilled in this past month. Were they goods or services? Were they convenience items? Were they shopping items where you compared information before the purchase? Were they specialty goods? Or were they unsought products? What industrial products were involved when you fulfill these wants? Now let's take the information and principles covered in this lesson and apply it to a situation so we can continue to build strong ethics and character in business through the gray zone. Think about fur as an economic product. Where does it fall in an economic product? What do you think about fur as a product? Is it ethical to sell fur? Is it ethical to buy it? You may have seen in media where protesters will throw paint or other goods on someone wearing fur in an attempt to ruin said product. Is that ethical? To ruin fur in protest? That wraps up our lesson. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check us out on Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Rumble, and the Kloeker Education Foundation website. Our next lesson on supply and demand is just a click away. I'll see you there.